Tuam was probably the first supermarket in Ireland.
The only reason they fostered me was to help them work on the land.
When you go on to the 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s, there were various TDs of that time who asked questions in relation to the nourishment within the hospital or within the mother and baby home.
Tuam is not just a burial ground, it's a social and cultural sepulchre. That's what it is. Because as a society, in the so-called good old days, we did not just hide away the dead bodies of tiny human beings. We dug deep, and we dug deeper still, to bury our compassion, to bury our mercy, to bury our humanity itself.
You know, they think like, oh, we've just this report and then that issue from the 50s and 60s is done. We've dealt with that now. But it's having such a long-lasting generation. There's so many people like our family or me in the country.
She was sent back to the home, but she was fostered out again at 8 years old, out to Killalea family. And unfortunately, her experience there was horrific.
We see the financial consideration coming up again and again, that it was a concern over money. You know, the decision on whether to close this institution where hundreds of children died in appalling conditions, where children were forcibly separated from their mothers, that money was the main consideration.
I was the first parliamentarian to raise concerns that had publicly emerged through the publication in the Sunday Mail with respect to the burial of children and infants at the site at the Tuam Mother and Babies Home. I raised it in the Dáil. Unfortunately, I got removed from the Dáil that day. I was asked to leave because I was in breach of standing orders.
Any woman that went in there had to suffer.
How is Mark Killalea still getting glorified after his death, after what he done to my mother? I personally think it's outrageous.
We took their babies and we gifted them, or we sold them, or we trafficked them, or we starved them, or we neglected them, or we denied them, to the point of their disappearance from our hearts and from our sight, from our country, and in the case of Tuam, and possibly other places, from life itself.
I've known Anne Silk since 2014. That's when the story of the Mother and Baby Home in Tuam broke.
The very first impression she left on me is, this is some woman, the epitome of resilience.
We met Anne here about this time last year on the site. She made a great effort to come down here to kind of speak with us. And hearing it firsthand, of course, as you know, is kind of a little bit tougher than reading it.
The one thing that stands out is her smile, especially with all she's been through. How she could smile after such a torturous experience in life is beyond me, and I suppose, you know, I would actually try to reciprocate what she does, and she does it so brilliantly, is how to deal with life. And to this day, you know, that's the impression she leaves on me.
In 2014, quite a lot of the survivors of the Tuam home began to contact me and call to the door, and I facilitated everybody. And Anne was one of those people who wanted to tell her story, because she was born in the home in Tuam, and she had a very tough childhood. She was fostered out to a woman in the early stages, but that didn't work out, and Anne was sent back to the home again. So Anne is one of the few people that remembers life in the Tuam home, because a lot of the other survivors, they left the home, especially the boys. They left the home at about maybe 4 years, 5 years old, and they have very little memory of it. All they remember is going out the door of the Tuam home and being brought out to a foster home. But Anne does remember.
They were very cruel, the nuns. I remember a child being kicked, and I don't know where, it was a nun, and she was a small nun. Now I know the child was smaller than me when I look back at it, and they kicked her, and the blood was pouring out of her. She was taken away. I'd never seen the child after that, never.
More than 9,000 children died in the mother and baby homes investigated by the Commission of Investigation into these institutions. Hundreds died at Tuam. More than 1,000 children died in Sean Ross Abbey. We still don't know where more than 800 children who died in Bessborough are buried.
The government in Ireland are well known for hiding things, for delaying things, for ignoring things. And I wanted to make sure that those children were not ignored, that they weren't forgotten about. And I wanted the people who grew up in the home, that they would have a voice. The vast majority of the children were just buried without a prayer, without anyone present. They just died, they were wrapped up, and they were placed in this useless septic tank. So we had plaques made. They're made in bronze, and they are stored away with all the names of the children who died. They are stored until we get an answer as to why this happened, how it happened, why would a religious congregation, the Bon Secours Sisters, who would have had knowledge of proper hygiene and nursing care, so many should not have died. And that is why I stuck with this.
In 2018, while I was still writing this book, the state committed to a full forensic excavation and exhumation in Tuam to try and identify the remains, to excavate them from the site and to give them a dignified burial. And yet we are still waiting for that to happen. Survivors are still waiting. Action has not been taken. And this is just an ongoing pain for families. Many fear that they will die before they know where their loved ones are buried, or they have the chance to lay them to rest with dignity. As one survivor said, take those children out of the septic tank, give them some dignity, lay them to rest.
There was a woman in there, and her 4 fingers were gone. And she said, what happened? She said, I cut them with a knife. So she had to be brought in, and they had to be amputated altogether. And she said, why did you do that? Because of the big drums. All the clothes would be put into this big drum, and to go around and washed, and then to be all in a heap, and they had to try and pull them out. Can you imagine? Trying to tear them out. So she did that in order she wouldn't have to work anymore. I was born in the mother and baby home in Tuam. The reason that I'm with you here today, I just want to tell what went on in Ireland in the past, and of the church and the nuns, what they did, that they shouldn't have done.
I remember the babies here in the home in Tuam being all left out in wooden pens, and the bottles be thrown in at them, and you see them being made by buying a rabbit that was on our birth certificates. And she used to throw the bottles in, and other mothers would come along and feed the babies.
I was born on the 11th May 1941 in St. Patrick's Mother and Baby's Home. I was there for about 3 to 4 years. Then I went on to St. Philomena's, Stillorgren. And I was there for another 3 or 4 years. And then to the CBS, Carrigley, Then that was closed up in 54 and I moved down to St. Joseph's, Tralee. Stayed there till about the end of 59.
I started my research back in 2012. I only started out small doing an essay for our local historical journal, decided to do it on the home, and it's only by degrees when I found out what went on in the home.
My mother got pregnant and somebody went down and told the priest, and the priest came up to the house, and of course he laid down the laws then and told her that she was to be kept indoor, so as the other kids around wouldn't see her, the other girls. And when the baby was due to be born, then that she was to be taken to Tuam, where the nuns here would look after her.
You see, no nuns broke into our homes to kidnap our children. We gave them up to what we convinced ourselves was the nuns' care. We gave them up maybe to spare them the savagery of gossip, the wink and the elbow language of delight, in which the holier-than-thous were particularly fluent. And we gave them up because of our perverse, in fact, morbid relationship with what you call respectability. And for a while, indeed, it seemed as if in Ireland our women had the amazing capacity to self-impregnate.
No one followed the fathers. No one closed the doors on the fathers and said, hold on a minute, because it takes two to make a baby. But it's the mother that had to suffer because they had to carry the baby for 9 months. But nobody went chasing after the father. The priest didn't say, hold on a minute. I heard you, the father. Yes, you're the father, so you have to take responsibility as well.
They were older than me. I was 20. I'd say they were in their late 20s. And they were scruffy looking and everything. I got so afraid. And then to just start pulling at me and dragging me and beating me and just, you know what I mean, treating me like I was dirt. And the pain was unreal. And they just kept going. I got very, very upset by it. Because they just left me with nothing. Not even my dignity. They took everything from me. And destroyed my life.
The men got away with everything. Got away with everything.
Any woman that went in there had to suffer. She carried that child for 9 months. And the next thing was she had to stay there for 12 months to look after the child, do domestic, slaving there for what? For the Catholic, for the nuns and for all that. And the next thing was out the door, and the door slammed behind your back, never to return.
Luckily enough, in the 1980s, a woman taped her of her experience in the home, and there's a wealth of information there of how the mothers were treated, how the children were treated, how they were ignored, how they were left to their own devices, how they were never stimulated or encouraged. There was no books, no toys, they were just left wandering around like little puppies.
I used to feel very lonely for the child that the mother went out. The mother went out into the little thing, it'd be so lonely and piney, you couldn't please it. It was taken from, when the mother was 8, it was individual care. The mother went 3 or 4 times a day to look after it, which they had to do. But then the day the mother came, the baby's mother, they used to do it. They'd buy a whole outfit for the birthday, whatever bit of money they had, they'd buy an outfit for the birthday. They dressed the child on his birthday, whatever, the child was all done up with new clothes. Maybe before that evening was out, their own parents came to the hall door and brought them, never asked to see the poor little child. That was the end of the mother and child connection, and the child then was taken out. That was the nursery, and they were taken to another room where the child, the year-olds were. And she was put in there maybe with 40 more year-olds, and no more individual love. Right? It was a horrible, horrible. And the child pined, and I suppose for days on end was watching out for the mother. All of a sudden a shock like that. No mother anymore. The mother was there this morning, she wasn't there next month. and the child was in with a hole, maybe 40 more children bawling and crying and screeching and shouting and, you know, often or crying and letting. It was a miserable old place, and it was a heartbreaking place.
The women were made dirt of. And they try to this day to do, but they're not winners anymore. They stand up for themselves, fair play to them. And that's what I've learned to do, stand up for myself. Yeah.
So these are the pictures that they gave me when we got the autopsy. And the insensitivity of taking pictures of her like this and sending them on to me for a keepsake. That's not how you want to remember your child. The insensitivity of that alone. And they didn't ask what clothes you wanted her to wear, you know, what you wanted her buried in. So they just put that gown on her.
They actually made me stand on the steps of St. Patrick's for punishment, to watch my son be taken.
So when the 12 months was up, then they opened the door and told her she'd have to leave. They made all the decisions. Now, if my mother had £100 that time, which you couldn't, totally impossible, she could have bought me. But they had the money back in them days. So she went around June looking for work then because she didn't want to leave me there. She always had in her mind, I'm going to take him out of there.
My mother told me she wasn't allowed to hold me, cuddle me or feed me or do nothing for me. It was other mothers that would do and all. And that was hurtful enough to hear.
I was a 16-year-old technician trainee in the post-office engineering branch. And my job was basically to work on the coin boxes around the city. We got a call out, there was a regular problem with faults in the St. Patrick's home for mothers and babies. It was called locally as the Ma and Ba's home. And so I came up, and because I was the young fella, I was the young lad, I was the one who got the job of going into the hallway where the phone was, changing the transmitter, because it was over. There was the only phone in the hall for the young girls. So most of the girls, there were kids around my own age actually. But when I was leaving, I heard screaming coming from down the corridor, and it really affected me. I went home and I told my mother. My mother said, "Oh yeah, we know about that. That's the babies. They take the babies off them, you know." And I thought, jeez, I suffered for terrible. It was really frightening, you know, what happened, you know, for me. But I got no counselling or anything like that. There's no such a thing. They'd laugh at me if I told them in the job, like.
Well, I spoke to a woman in Maryland Park. She put a cast on my arm here when I put out the elbow. And she told me that her father was a handyman. And he went into the home in Galway, the laundry, to do repair works. And he brought the 4 kids with him, that's including herself. And the nuns came out and gave them soup, because it was a cold day, and they sat in the cart because the mother was working. So he wasn't finished then, so he decided to go down the next day. But he didn't bring the kids with him, and so he went off himself. And he said there was nobody about, and he opened the door and he went in, and he could see 2 babies in each cot. And he said they were drinking milk out of the bottle. Now he said there was one strong baby, one weak baby. And when the strong baby had his bottle finished, he took the bottle off the weak one and drank his. And he said the nuns just came and caught the bottles and threw them into a bath. So the nuns didn't know that that weak baby had sufficient amount taken. So that's probably the reason why a lot of them died. They were neglected, just give him the bottle there and not reading the real one, he's not getting enough at all.
All I remember is I used to take care of the babies upstairs and get close to a couple of them, and then you go back and the babies are gone. And then there was different babies there, and I kept getting close. And then one day I asked, and I said, where's the babies? Oh, they're gone, they're gone. And I said, where? It doesn't matter, it's none of your business.
People could come in and buy babies. And if the weak one then, well, if it died, that's it, just get rid of it. It's like bad fruit.
But it was the county council then, not the nuns.
Not the nuns at all.
That arranged for the children
But
to be adopted.
No, they advertised on the Conic Tribune. They advertised so many children were boarding out. The ages such to
Then no.
Foster parents wanted.
Yes, but it was the county council that did this.
County council, not the nuns at all.
The nuns had no real say in this.
No, at all. Not at all. Not at all.
When I went into labour, I wasn't awake. So to this day, I don't know how they delivered my baby. I actually don't know. And they're saying that there's no notes of the actual birth. It was only of the labour. And the labour says it all in itself. They let her die. It's as simple as that. They didn't save her. They could have saved her. But they didn't choose to let her go. It was the way they said it was very, very hurtful. Your baby died. Now get up and get on with it. Get up and get on with it. They put me in a room where there was mothers in there with their babies. And put me in there, and I started crying. I got very, very upset. And then I started laughing because my nerves started at me. And I said, oh, you find everything funny? I said, no, actually, you're fucking hilarious, I said. You put, my baby died, I said, and you put me in here, mother, with their babies, I said, torture me a bit more, I said, why don't you keep on, I said. And then after that, I'm not sure how long I was in the home. I could have been in there for 9 months. I could have been there 6 months. I don't know, because I was drugged so much.
Yeah, I asked for a lock of hair because I just wanted something of her to keep. And I never did get the lock of hair.
I was told it was the presentation coming, but I do remember going out the side door and in, and we weren't allowed to talk to other children. And you'd say hello, and the parents would say, don't talk to them, they're from the home in Tuam.
We were sent down to school then, and how I remember is that's the only time we got out, because I don't call that place a home, I call it a prison. That's what it was, because if you look out the windows, there's a high wall all around, you couldn't see anything. So we were marched down to school in the morning, and you held on to the hand of the next child, and you were marched down with the nuns down to school. Now we had to go 10 minutes late in the morning. We had to leave 10 minutes early in the evening, so we wouldn't mix with the kids from outside. You know, that's the punishment. Like that, we were known as bastards. That was the name that was put on us because we were bought out of marriage. So we go in and put into a room, and that was it. Spend the day back again, locked up again for the evening. Same thing next morning. Now the kids that would come in, if they came in late, the teacher would warn them. if you come in late now tomorrow, you will be sitting with the kids from the home, and they didn't want that. Because the mothers will give out to them if they go home and then say, you know, we don't want you sitting with them.
Even though I was only about 5 or 6 at the time, I do remember them being in the class, and I remember them as being, you could say, shabby, kind of cold looking, very thin and very, very quiet. And they weren't treated the same as the rest of the children in the class. They were kind of kept on their own. They were segregated, and they were very seldom they would be asked questions. They just sat there during the day. And we were told by the nuns not to mix with those children.
We used to go out to school, and it was lovely going out to school. We got a break, but all the other children used to insult us and call us, oh, here they come, no mother and no fathers, look at the state of them. So we had to put up with all that. And I met a boy one time, and he was talking to me, and we got on well together. And I used to sneak out to go to the cinema to meet him, and then I'd come back, and it was a 6-foot wall, and I couldn't get back in. I just have to ring the doorbell, and I rang the doorbell. Well, she greeted me with the cane, and she beat the living daylights out of me, and I wasn't able to go to school for 3 weeks because of all the bruises.
I went to a national school then, where the foster parents had brought me, and I used to go in for the rolls to be called, and they'd be taken out a lot out of it. It's very clean. I was a slave there.
And then you talk to people who were in the school at the time with them, and some of them said they had, some of them were jealous because they were dressed. I mean, the kids in other baby home, they were dressed. They had shoes, and not something every child had going to school that time. So it depends on. It's very hard to roll back the clock and think of a time when we had no cameras or phones, and think of a time when we had, I suppose, no access to media or social media. A time when if you got a chest infection, you probably died because there was no antibiotics. And that's what you have to imagine when you're going back to the time of the 50s, of the 20s, 30s and 40s, that you simply didn't have medication. It wasn't there. I mean, if you got really sick, you died. And, as a consequence of that is why there were so many hospitals in Ireland.
There were some brothers who were pretty cruel, and but they weren't all cruel, and I'd be the first to say it, When you're in these places, you learn pretty fast how to dodge and who not to upset. In other words, you get what they call you learn to be street clever. You know who not to antagonize, and you know when to do things and when not to.
Oh, they used to throw, here in the home, they used to throw the bread out. Like, the batch loaves, and squeeze them and throw them out at you, as if we were animals, and the people had just grabbed them up, and now I used to eat them all. It was lovely. And I say that's why I was in hospital a lot for. I was put down as a celiac, but I'm not suffering with that today. I had a test done and all, no celiac. Yeah, but we all tried to survive, but we used to be starving. No, I don't. The loaves of bread, I remember that all right. I remember them thrown out, and everyone was fighting over, but they were very cruel, the nuns.
There was an awful lot of pot bellied.
The children?
Yeah.
Why, Julia?
Pot bellied from the old starchy food,
Was it cheap food, Julia?
The cheapest way to be run, like. There was nothing like sausages or rashers or eggs or anything like that. There was nothing like what the ordinary child getting at home. Without porridge and milk and mashed potato and soup. And that kind of cheapest.
Yeah, oh yeah, we used to eat mass. There was another child which a few kids now used to eat mass. I said, it's lovely. It was lovely because we were hungry. That's the truth. You feel the clay now, it's still on me in my mouth. No, I don't eat it today though.
The kids outside, they could enjoy Christmas coming, Easter coming, summer coming because holidays. Like we hadn't a clue about that. When I went out to my foster mother's home, nearly 7 years of age, and they're putting up the Christmas tree and they were explaining it to me, and I all excited. You know, the glass of milk and the carrot for the roll toff, and then you were put to bed early. And like, this was all new to me at 7 years of age, like.
I actually thought every people loved black people because you were always getting sweets. You go to the shop and someone would give you an extra lollipop and all this. And you'd made plenty of friends because they all knew you got the sweets, so you shared them with them. And that I used to take advantage of that. And so you grew up with a complete misconception of the situation. And I'd go to a shop or somebody just give me sweets, or if there was parents visiting, they'd see me in the yard, say, tell their son, you give that to that nice little lad with the curly hair.
They'd be trying to get up on your knees and trying to love you like the lad there now. You know, looking for affection.
And did you give it to them?
Well, Eileen and them used, of course. They weren't as smart at all as children outside. They were very backward children altogether. You know now the only thing they'd have coming up the road, they'd say, we saw Daddy, we saw Mammy. Everyone on the road was Daddy and everyone on the road was Mammy. You know, they were that stupid now. And they'd pick out a nice lady that they think would like to be the mother, say, that's my Mammy, they'd say, you know. Or everyone was Daddy to them.
She was just saying, like, when she grew up, she didn't have affection. She didn't have kisses and cuddles and people telling her she loved her or people looking out for her. She didn't have any of that, so she didn't know how to give it all the time. Mum's version of love was making sure, and this is her words, this is what she said to me, like her way of showing love was making sure we got to school, we had clothes on our back, we had food, you know, that we were looked after.
An elderly man used to laugh at us because if there was a car or something parked on the side of the road, we used to look into the mirror and we started laughing and looking again. We didn't realise it was a mirror. We thought it was just one of these funny glasses.
When I was being taken out of there for the final time out of the home here in Tuam, I was dressed up and I was picked out of 3 children. Lovely dressed up and brought into a parlour and picked out of 3 children. So that was that anyway. So
eventually anyways, I was fostered out, lucky enough now to a nice family, but they couldn't have a family. So they seen in the local paper then fostering an adoption in Tuam. So they had to apply it in, but they had to apply to the Galway County Council. So then they had to come down then and have a look to see what child they liked. So what my mother told me, my foster mother told me was that we were sitting in a circle on the floor and they would walk around and look at a child to see which one they would pick. Now my foster father would be looking for a strong young lad for farming and that, you know. But as they walked around, I just happened to look up and just gave a smile to the foster mother, and that was it. I'm taking him.
It was like a stigma, even if you were white. So you can imagine what it was like if you were black. Whoever took you on would have to be pretty strong because of the attitude of people back then. You have got to understand the periods at that time. It was almost a no-no. It was bad enough born out of wedlock, being white, but born out of wedlock and being black in a white country was definitely a no-no.
Odd used to beat me up, and I used to be left hungry as well. And the foster father, now he was nice to me. He wasn't too bad, but there were TDs in the doll, and he always counted me in the pot, as I call it. And he'd give me a dinner, and he'd be home at the weekends, and he'd cook, and he'd count us all in the pot. But I wasn't allowed to eat with the family or anything. So they had 3 sons and 3 daughters of their own, but they were all reared. So I was the youngest to take in all the slavery for. She was 58-year-old that fostered me out. And I had to go to school in the morning, hail, rain or snow. And this woman, neighbour, my friend will tell you, she used to collect me after the road being called, and I'd have to polish the house. They had 7 bedrooms.
We also have to keep in mind the awful conditions in which some survivors were. I mean, you know, they were forced labour on farms a lot of the time. They were forced labour in industry, which was big at the time, 50s and 60s, the Industrial Revolution here in Ireland. So, I mean, there was a lot of bad, but I think there was even more good, but it's just not been looked at.
They battered me one time with my teeth. What happened there? Oh, I hadn't the work done. And the son came along, and he battered my face against the wall and pulled my head in, and he battered me against the wall, and my teeth were destroyed. So at 12-year-old, I had 4 dentures. 12-year-old, I had dentures. That's what happened there, yeah. And I'd say he denied it to the guards too. Yeah. Yeah, he battered me against the wall because I hadn't the work done.
You know, nobody ever came along and asked you how you were. They always went to the foster mother and the foster father. They never spoke to the child. They seen you, and you were dressed, you were well dressed, and you were fed and that kind of thing. But they never considered your emotional needs, and that was never looked at. And I don't think that was looked at in lots of children that were fostered. They were a commodity in lots of houses. Same as I was a commodity, because the only reason they fostered me was to help them work on the land.
I was a slave there. Used to have to milk the cows in the morning and milk them again in the evening. And their bedroom wasn't the same as mine. Sorry to say, I wet the bed, and I used to sleep in that bed every night. Every night was wet. And had a spring mattress, what we call them iron mattress, all had gone rotten through.
It's hard to describe. It's very hard to describe. You know, you can say so much, like, but there's something else that won't come out that you want to tell, kind of, I don't know what it is. And I often think people committing suicide and everything, and people say they're sick, they're this, they're that, and I don't know, it's just hard to explain what. I suppose it's just life. I'd say it's kind of, your mind is dead and that's it. That's the way I feel, even the body is still moving. Right? That's the way you could nearly put it, kind of thing. And you just want to jump in and get finished with a lot of it then. And I suppose you had somebody to talk to, or thing like that. You know, maybe if you had a friend or somebody, it's hard to know. People who have friends and they still do it. So it's just one of those things. Just one of those things.
I was brought back one night. So I had rope with me and I was brought back one night to do it. So, but you're put into that situation that you couldn't get out of. And no matter where you went and told your story, you know, you didn't know who you were talking to then, it was all going back to them, you know. So
it's hard to explain how much a person who doesn't know who they are, they desperately need their identity of where they came from and who they belong to and what they're made up of. It's a human right.
There's a lot of people, even whether they were white or black, must have had desolate times on their own. And I would see how some of them cracked up and mentally they got affected because they had nobody. And part of that was because they were told nothing about their families, they were told nothing about their background, and they were left literally isolated.
The best remedy at this juncture, in my view, to secure justice is to open every door, to offer every resource, to ensure that every answer that's possible is not withheld. And I think there's a human right around having access to that information. I think it's a civil right.
If you had no contact, it would have been hell to live.
You know, the system only shut down so recently and was a system that enforced secrecy and shame onto women and their children, and that this continued for so long in this country and is still ongoing. So adopted people in this country are still denied the access to their own birth information, their original birth cert. Survivors are still trying to access information and facing barriers to accessing their own records or even their own names, you know, what their mother called them when they were born in an institution, the records that you know, can give answers about their own identity that are held by the state, and also some records still held by the religious orders who incarcerated them. And so there's an ongoing, you know, system of secrecy and silence being perpetuated in Ireland today in our names. So this is definitely an ongoing legacy and something continuing to affect so many lives.
When I finished about my self-submission, I then just said innocently to Judge Murray, "Can I ask you a little question?" And then I said, there's a lot of things that are in a lot of people's documents, under Act this or under Act that or redacted. Why were these put in to people, stopping them from getting their information about their background? And she said to me, that was upheld when it was challenged in the High Court back in the early 80s. And usually when you hear the High Court upheld it, your chances are zero, you can't do much about it. Then I said to her, but I thought everybody at this stage, when they reached 16, 18, they were entitled to their full background information. And now you're saying to me the High Court has upheld that. Then I said to her, is this in the Constitution? And they looked at one another and said no. Then I said, the only things that are protected here is what's in the Constitution. Am I right? She said, yeah. Now I says, we joined the EU in 73. So under that, only the things in the Constitution are protected. Anything outside that, European law overrides it. And they looked at one another. And then she said, yes, European law over it. So I said, therefore, this is illegal. And she says, I'll have to speak to the government about this.
When you hear what they've gone through in the bad side, you know, it's very hard to block that from your mind. You know, there have been plenty of sleepless nights for, I suppose, anyone who was elected including myself, when you hear some stories that you're lying awake at night saying, how could we have, as a state have, put up with such horrific attitudes towards people who couldn't defend themselves. And I suppose that's really that's really heartbreaking for a lot of people that, I suppose, take their work seriously and take it to heart.
I did a lot of running away now, I did. From the foster home, I was gone all the time nearly. Guards brought me back, and now it'd be kind, now it'd be good, and you'd be grand, and next thing you'd be gone again. So I remember they were called sisters at the time. She wasn't a nun, but very religious. And she said, I want you in my office. So she came and she said, why tell me lies? Why tell me lies? Oh my God. And said, yeah. She said, so that was it then, the truth came out. I said, I'm not going back to them. I kill myself first before I go back to them. She said, no, you're not going back.
My grandfather, I understand, was a bicycle repairman who got involved in the War of Independence in 1919, and he would have been one of the founding members of Fianna Fáil in 1927. So he would have been, I suppose, got involved in politics, I suppose, knowing the personalities of the time for that reason. I mean, he would have been, I suppose, he would have been respected by a lot. He was a long time a member of the Oireachtas. His name was Mark Killalay. He moved to the Tuam area in the late 30s, and he represented the constituency for more or less a lot of that time. He was known as Mark Killalay Senior. My father was known as Mark Killalay Junior. So he was an ordinary person.
The foster father hardly ever touched me, because he knew that what his job was, TD. So his son took over his place when he passed away. Are you with me? He was a TD as well. He only died there on New Year's Eve. He died of cancer there, I heard. Gone. Bye. They give me awful beatings with the horse's whip and that. Yeah. The mother was hitting me and I was protecting myself, and I went to hit her. So he said, you'll never do that to my mother again. That's what it was. And he stripped me from the waist down and belted me, put me across a chair and belted me. Had the blood pouring out of me. Couldn't sit. And the man says, Anthony, what happened? You say you fell. That were the answers I was to give. And the brother sexually abused me. And the first time he did it was in his mother and father's bed. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't my bed at all. It was his mother and father's bed. And I didn't know what he was doing, to be honest, which I didn't know. We were going to go to court for corporal punishment, the beatings he gave me and that. And then the guard said to me that he's very ill. Carmel will tell you there. And I said, sure, I'm ill as well. And I reported that, and we were just going into the court, 2 weeks into the High Court here in Dublin, and he was gone. So there was no court case, and I wasn't heard. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't heard.
Charlotte was Mark Killalay Senior's son. He was in the house when Mum got fostered out. He would have been like 10, 12 years older than Mum at the time, so early 20s. He would have assaulted her sexually, physically. He was the one Mum was very angry at too, obviously, because she was young and didn't know. She wasn't even in her teens, like. So realistically, he's a paedophile, like. That's the calibre of people she got fostered out to and wasn't checked in on.
The girls who grew up in the home and they were fostered out, they had no sex education and they didn't really understand how pregnancy occurred.
They would often be, sent away from the institutions with no education, and for women, no knowledge about sex or their own bodies, even menstruation. Women weren't taught anything about that. It was never spoken about.
They never had any affection from anybody, even in the home, or then when they went out to this family, they were treated as a slave. And I suppose they met these men or young boys, and all of a sudden they have somebody to care for them and who like them. And a lot of the time they will get taken advantage of because, as I said, they don't know they don't know what their own bodies, and they end up pregnant and they don't know how or why. And of course, they end up in the same system back in the home again, and their own child will be taken off them. So it's a vicious circle all along.
I spoke to women who would have been sent out of these institutions at 16, very vulnerable, and became pregnant very quickly, and then were sent back to a mother and baby home institution, and then maybe even a Magdalen laundry after that. So generations of people sent through these institutions, and denied access to their own identity, denied their relationships with family, or a community, and institutionalized sometimes for their entire lives.
Somebody bring me back there again, so I was back in square one all the time. So then they put me working down in Kilkenny, and that was the sister, their daughter. And she had me for a few weeks, and then I was put into a Magdalen laundry. I think they thought I was pregnant, but I wasn't. That's the truth now. I wasn't. And anyways, I wouldn't have given up the child if I was, because of what I went through. But I ran away from there after 6 months being in it. We had planned to bring a bag of stuff with us, but we didn't. We didn't go back for it. We said, leave it there, we keep going, Once we got out past the gates, we knew we were free, But if you were caught, you were brought back and locked up. But that didn't happen to us, thank God. A lorry came in to bring in the laundry. So we were down at the changing room, to check in the clothes and that. So we looked at the turn, myself and another girl, and we legged it. And a lorry gave us a lift all the way to Limerick. So we stayed in the guard station for the night because we had nowhere to go. And they were very nice to us, but we gave false names. And from there on, then I started working in the local hospital, and I was there for 15 years.
A lot of them got work on farms and that, and of course they were an easy target for people, and they would have been raped, quite a lot of them.
He was only a few years older than me. He was going to college, yeah. I went to my social worker in Galway, and I made a special journey to her. And I had an appointment. It was 2 o'clock in the day, and I know it was bank holiday weekend because that's how I met my husband. And I went especially down to her. I was in 5 minutes with her, and I said, I want to make a complaint. I was only 26 at the time. The abuse I got when I was a child with them people. And she said, you're no longer in my jurisdiction, she said. I don't need to hear this. She said, you're no longer my jurisdiction. She was a social worker at the time. And that's what I was. I came out and I cried and I cried and I cried. Liza, such a wasted journey.
I don't know why they gave themselves this kind of power to do that, you know? And a little bit of love wouldn't have gone too far, you know?
I'd love to get into the mind of these nuns and what way they were thinking of, because as I said, they were followers of Christ and they're supposed to look after the poor, the vulnerable, the weak and the dying and that. And why did they do what they did, like, you know? And then when you look, then you think greed, power and money. as the world destroyed. And that's what happened to these nuns. That's what happened, Rome, the church, everything. It all came down to power and money, control on everyone, and keep people down.
Really and truly, what amazes me is that no nun, Christian brother or parish priest ever went to jail or ever stood in a courtroom for the injustice that they did to children and to mothers. And that's appalling. That's neglect by the church and neglect by the state. And I find that very, very hard to deal with.
Whether these people who were trained in these broadcasties thought this was a place of punishment, I think that's where they got it all wrong. And they treated everyone as if you're in here because of a misdemeanor. Now, whether you were born out of wedlock or whether you committed a crime, as far as they were concerned, they were the same. And that was a serious problem. Their training was very bad. And they had this mentality, we've got to teach you to behave yourself, we've got to. And they treated you as if you were a criminal. Then that was the wrong way to go about it.
There's so much more work to be done. My own personal opinion is that the Commission of Investigation didn't dig deep enough into what happened locally here in Tuam.
I was down with Mum and I was like, you know, how do you feel about the report? And she was like, I cried. I was like, I don't blame you. Like, it was a shambles. And I think part of her felt glad that something had been done. There was an acknowledgement, but then it was a disgrace to every survivor from any home and any victim in this country. And she was so hurt by that.
We need full transparency with respect to the role of local authorities, the government, the religious orders. I'm not in a position to dispute that that hasn't been the case. Has it been the most efficient exchange of information? With the passage of time, I doubt it.
You're very angry, you're very, very angry, and you just want to get to the bottom of it. But religion had a lot to do with it too.
The state outsourced or turned a blind eye. The only infrastructure that was there to achieve some form of living welfare, a welfare with a small w, the state outsourced that to the Catholic Church.
The shortcomings of the state has let them down, and still hasn't, you know, people of 70 years of age get a medical card. A lot of these people, unfortunately, are damaged through the care of the state, and now more than ever they need to be looked after. And this has always been a priority from the very first time that I met Anne. I could see the hurt and pain that was inflicted on her over the years, and the denial of the state, saying that any hand part in it, and also Walter and PJ. And I think their resilience is something that I would strive to have myself, because they are role models for me.
Unfortunately, there's such a negativity, rightly so, I suppose, around the mother and baby home here in Tuam, that there's almost a stigma attached to anyone who was adopted out. You know, that if they come forward and say, I was adopted from the mother and baby home for some reason, they feel that there's a stigma attached to them. And I know that from talking to people who had a good life afterwards. I mean, I've got phone calls from people in America and that, you know, who said that they did have a good life. But, you know, for some reason, they're not going to come forward on the basis that, you know, not that they have nothing to hide, but that they feel that there may be a stigma to the family that adopted them because they had babies or adopted babies out of the mother and baby home. So while a lot of it was bad, and while the deaths of the babies were probably unavoidable in fairness, I think for those that survived in a positive way, it would be nice to see them come forward and make statements on their lives as well.
A social worker used to come now every month, and she was said not to show her that bedroom. This bedroom wasn't my bedroom at all, where I was sleeping, and a window open all the time. Hail, frost and snow, you couldn't close it. No.
There have been politicians from generation to generation that they wouldn't have been questioned anyways. I would say that people probably didn't even come to the door. I know from speaking with Mum that she never had any interview with any counsellor or was asked how she was treated or anything like that. If anything, I'd say it was just a done deal. Whatever was told to, if a person even appeared at the gate, that it was given as word that it was all good. Keep on moving, there's nothing to see here.
The best action to demonstrate that we have learned something here is to protect the vulnerable survivors.
Do you know, and like Mum said it to me, so I was like, you know, make sure you've got people supporting you through all that. And Mum goes, oh, they're not doing that till sometime next year in 2022. And she goes, and this is the week before she passed away, she goes, it's like they're waiting for us all to just die off.
I started really getting into the whole story, wanting to do more, wanting those children to be heard, wanting the story to be out there. And then, of course, the burials then were the epitome of the whole thing. So many died, a lot of them needlessly, and they were just wiped away. They were just wiped out of history. They were put down in a former sewage tank. They weren't even given the decency of a burial or of a few prayers or even of a little coffin.
There are many families, there are mothers who are still searching for where their own children are buried. And when it comes to Tuam, the remains of infants and children are still in these sewage chambers. And the state is failing to act and to help provide families with answers and some form of solace. One mother said to me that she would never be at peace until she found out where her daughter was buried.
They were making money on us. They made money on us. Even though we were not in the home, they still got money for feeding us from the government.
When the babies died there, the nuns were getting £5 from the council to bury the child. And instead of that, then they kept the £5 and they put the child into the disused sewage tank because it was empty anyways. And if you're baptised, you're supposed to get a decent burial. And the most annoying thing about it, when the hospital and the home closed down, they took the nuns' remains. They brought in new coffins and took the remains up of the nuns and brought them down and buried them. So in that disgraceful, and to do what they did, what we call them angels, in that septic tank, they could do that to the nuns. They were buried twice, so they were, with full church, Catholic, the lot.
The minister's recommendation was met with resistance by some, most notably from the council's co-chair, Mark Killalea Sr., who was also a Fianna Fáil TD. As long as the home was located in Tuam, he said, the county has the benefit of the money spent there. And that is a direct quote. The county has the benefit of the money spent there. And so Mark Killalea Sr. opposed the closure of Tuam, an institution where we know hundreds of children had died, where the conditions were so bad that it was described as a fire trap by the relevant authorities. And yet, this influential man, this man in a position of power, wanted the institution to remain open because of the benefit of the money spent there. To now know that Mark Killalea and his family had fostered a child from Tuam, had used a vulnerable young woman, a child, a girl like Anne Silk, for labour, for unpaid labour in their home. I think it says a great deal about how these children were viewed, how they were kept in an institution where the conditions were inhumane, where there were risks to lives of children, and yet this institution was kept open because of the benefit of the money spent there and the resistance to spend money to bring it up to standard.
Some people may consider it ironic that those little infants who died at the Tuam Mother and Babies Home are buried on the same site that we have a commemoration for some of our political martyrs. And the irony of that is that we're now approaching centenaries of revolutions in this country. I suppose the greatest irony is that Galway County Council invested heavily in a playground for living children who play above the souls and bodies of children who were taken in a dark period of time.
The state failed the families and survivors. There's 796 bodies in the grave there. But how many hundreds and possibly thousands went through it without being treated with the dignity and respect they deserve?
Politicians are still covering up and protecting their politician friends. Do you know, it's not okay. And Mark Killilea Jr.'s brother, who I believe was glorified as being a lovely man, was a child rapist. Do you know what I mean? What he did was nothing short of paedophilia.
It is so disturbing to think that a family with this influence, with this political power, was using a child born in Tuam for labour, was exploiting, a young child, a young girl in this manner, and that she was abused in their home and exploited in their home. And again, silence. No one spoke about it. No one tried to protect her. No one reported it. And she had no access to justice or protection.
I think no stone should be left unturned to balance justice.
I feel angry to a certain extent that we're not getting justice or anything, Everything is left just hanging on until we pass away.
The truth will come out, and it has to come out. And I'm pleading with the government, please, sort this out sooner rather than later. There's empty promises from 2014 till now. You have a mother, she loved you, she cared for you. That's what the state was supposed to do for these children, and it failed them.
I accept the conclusions of the Commission of Investigation. It hasn't been perfect. Has it satisfied everybody's concerns and needs? No, it hasn't. Could it have done that? Maybe we wouldn't have a publication today.
When the call came for the report, I gave a testimony. It was a page and a half long. And when I read the report, 3,000 or whatever pages it was, I found that my report was reduced down to a sentence, and it got everything wrong, got my age wrong, and it got the details of my experience wrong as well. And I was furious, and I wrote to the minister and said, I hope I didn't waste my time giving the testimony and then everything being thrown back in my face. So it's got to be sorted out. I don't think this is satisfactory. I know a lot of the women, for example, are very unhappy with the way they are portrayed in the report. And also, I'd be certainly calling for this housing estate now, a monument of some sort, a memorial of some sort for the women who suffered so much in this place. It was absolutely horrific experience. And for me, I'm still, even when I was talking about it now, I still feel it, seriously, it's terrible.
I said to Judge Murphy, I assume the others are au fait with what we'd already discussed. And she said, no, I didn't get a chance to tell them. Oh, so that gave me the chance. And I was delighted, because then I realised the consequences of getting that admission was like opening a Pandora's box. So I went through that, and of course, there was no disagreement. Judge Murphy was agreeing with what she had already admitted. And now I said to Mr. Duncan, the consequences of this is, let's say me, anybody, you, I, anybody, spent 10, 15, 20 years looking for their information and their background. And these laws deliberately stopped them, which in hindsight now was illegal. that added another 20, 30, 40 years of extra misery to all these people who were in these institutions. So they were made suffer even longer as a result of those laws, which we now know was illegal. And then to add insult to injury, some of these have discovered they had brothers and sisters they didn't even know about. On top of that, when they did get some information, they discovered their mother might have only died a month ago, 3 months ago, after they searching for 20, 30 years. Now, that to me is an indictment of the state to do that to these people. And when I finished, Mr. Duncan turned to Judge Murphy and asked him, "Is that true?" And she said, "Yes." And he pounded the table, took off his glass pound. He says, "This is outrageous. This has to be sorted out. This is an utter mess, and these people have to be compensated and have to be an apology has to be given to them for what was done to these people." Now, when the report came out, none of this was mentioned. All was mentioned was the Attorney General should consider giving everybody their full information of their background. It was written in such a short sentence as if that was trivial. And I trusted that she would say openly that these laws were illegal, which they were under Geneva, under European law, and under basic human rights. So which way they go was illegal. That is the indictment I had against the state, because they allowed it to happen. I know they did it to suit the religious orders, all that stuff, but the state was responsible for allowing that law to come in. They should never brought in these laws.
It's insanity, and they're still blaming the women and the victims, or they're at very least pretending to give them justice when what justice have they got?
I think we've made a giant step in having this investigation. Am I satisfied with the outcome? I can't undo the past. So I'm not satisfied. I'd love to undo the past. I'd love to see survivors who I know rest easy and put to bed their nightmares.
I heard the stories growing up and it just became normal. It's just something I accepted, that these things happened to Mum. In my head it started going like, oh, kids just got abused when they were in care and they got sexually abused. And I think I normalised that in my own head. And I just remember coming in to Mum, 13 or 14, going, "Mum, were you ever sexually abused when you were in care?" I was. And I went, okay, like that's Mum's life. That shouldn't be normal in any household. Do you know, that shouldn't have been normal for Mum growing up. That's the generational impact it is having on this country, and it's not been acknowledged.
My big regret is that, you know, the government gave an apology, a public apology, but it never got it in person. And it's something that will always bother me, because she went to her grave without a personal apology from a state that failed her.
You know, you just kind of think to yourself, first of all, how could that happen? Second of all, you know, to kind of think how could it be to live with that, you know? And for her to kind of carry on as she did is admirable, to say the least. Yeah, but a powerful lady, a great lady in Irish history, and I hope she's remembered as that. You know, there's someone who's helped us move forward in a way that we probably wouldn't unless things like this came to light.
She was beautiful in every way. She was so accepting of her life, and I couldn't believe that the way she spoke after what she had been through all her life. She was so accepting, and she took it all in her stride, just as a matter of fact. And she had the heartiest laugh. I'll always remember that. And no matter what, she would always end up with a funny remark and a laugh.
Her legacy will live on through this, and through everybody who met her along her journey in telling her story. And she could tell the story because she lived it, and that's why it makes it, you know, so heartbreaking.
I loved her company, and she just got along with everybody, and everybody loved her. She was so facilitating. When I would ask her, will you do this interview? Will you tell your story? And she said, I will, of course. And I mean, she had a good bit to travel from Leitrim up to Tuam, but it was never any bother to her. And it was only in the later years that her bronchitis got worse and worse. And even then, she would come to Tuam and bring her little oxygen tank with her. And many a time, all she could do was sit in the car and wait, and just, she would talk from the car. And I remember once as well, she came to the university in Galway where I was doing a talk, and she wanted to come. And I remember going over to the car. She was sitting in the back seat of the car with her tank. And some of the survivors were there with us. And I remember her saying, asking her, are you sure you're able to come in? And I remember her just saying, through a few gasps, give me a minute. And she insisted on coming in until she got her breath back. She was such a beautiful person, that's all. And I will always remember Anne and how she looked at life. She was an inspiration to everyone because she just took everything in her stride. She had a lovely large family. She had her own trouble throughout her marriage life. But then again, she just said that was it. Some of the family are very good to her, others aren't. And she took that on board as well. She said that's the way it is. And she had the brightest outlook on life. She was marvellous for that. And all the survivors, we all loved her, and we were heartbroken when we heard she had died alone. But that was Anne. That's probably the way she would have wanted it, because that was her spirit. And I know she is in a better place now, wherever that is, we don't know. She hadn't much time for the Catholic view of when we die, and I wholeheartedly agreed with her. And we had many a nice phone call. She would always ring up, and always again, she would end up with a joke or a laugh. So God rest you, Anne, and I know you're in a better place.
It's not their fault what other people done in a previous lifetime, and they probably didn't know them as that person. People mellow out, change, or whatever. Circumstances change, but they should also recognise that my mum isn't a liar. All this stuff happened, and it can't be brushed under the carpet forever.
And I would never buy a batch loaf. It was only once I had to come with no other bread in the house. So I would never buy a batch loaf because it brings that memory back of that place, of here.
springtime, 1959. Winter's gone, it's been kind. The flowers are blooming across the fields. And in the lakes and in the streams, fish they spawn and procreate in the springtime of 1959. Yeah, blackbird calls out to her mate. Nest is ready, nature waits. Bees pollinate the flowers and trees. Butterflies dance and romance. Girl meets boy at village dance in the springtime of 1959. People smile, their love it glows. Nature's way, nature knows. The love and magic's in the air. And now love is bliss, their first kiss. They tumble into love's abyss in the springtime